Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Michelle here from happyhealthyher.com. And in this week's Compassionate Chat, we are talking about the dark side of the 5 love languages. We will talk first about the positives and then dig into the negatives. Understanding both aspects of this information is very helpful in understanding ourselves and in connecting with people who are the healthiest for us. I have talked about this before in a previous compassionate chat on how powerful self-awareness is, and understanding your love languages is an incredibly powerful tool for your self-awareness. It's just another piece of your personality, basically, that when you understand helps to make everything a little bit easier. So I've talked about the concept of the 5 love languages in both of my books. In Online Dating for Sensitive Women, I talked about it in terms of dating and how understanding your love languages and the love languages of others can help you connect and date with people who are going to feel good and supportive. However, in Free from Narcissists, my book and course, I come at it from a little bit of a different side. I come of it at that dark side I keep alluding to. Because when you are someone who is around narcissistic people, which many of us these days are around narcissistic people, the love languages can oftentimes be used against us for manipulation. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But to begin with, I do want to talk about the 5 love languages just in general. This is the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I first learned about it on Super Soul Sunday, and I was watching, and at the time I was in my narcissistic marriage, and I had been trying everything to make things better. And listening to Gary talk about the love languages felt like a light bulb. I thought, this is going to be it. This will be something that can help us. So I bought the book and I tried to work on it with my partner. And unfortunately, his response was, I don't need to do any of these things. You know, when he learned my love languages, he was like, I don't really need to do this. You're my wife. I don't need to compliment you. I don't need to give you gifts. And he said this actually in therapy as well, to the therapist's horror. And so, as you can imagine, that marriage did not last because there was no desire on his part to do any work. But the core understanding of the love languages was incredibly helpful for me in understanding myself and what I ultimately would need in the partner that would really support me. The partner I have now fully honors my love languages. So I feel like this stuff has a lot of value. I will say I've heard other relationship experts, which I do not consider myself an expert, but I've heard people in this space talking about this and saying they don't think it's real, they don't think it has that much value, and I just don't agree. I think they are very helpful to understand because it's almost like they are like core foundational pieces of how people show up and how people interact. The love languages are essentially the things that people do for us or that we will even do for others that make us feel loved and connected. And they are often based on what we experienced in childhood. So it's just sort of, we all have a little bit of a different sense around how love feels. And that's important to understand when you are actually trying to connect with other people. So the 5 love languages, which actually, as I mentioned, occur in everyone, but in different degrees, are number 1, words of affirmation. So things like compliments. I have talked before about the power of validation and everyone needing validation. And this words of affirmation is actually an element of that. I'm going to link to the validation video below. But for many of us, words of affirmation helps us to feel that validation. And so this happens to be my number 1 language. The second love language is quality time. And this is often referred to as like undivided attention. This is people who want one-on-one time with their partner or their friend, whatever connection we're talking about. The third is receiving gifts. So this would be that makes us feel good. It makes us feel special to be given a gift. Fourth is acts of service. So this can be things like cooking a meal for someone, or running errands for them, or cleaning the house. So it's those little things that make the person feel loved and special. And then the fifth is physical touch. And Gary does stress that this is not necessarily sex. This is things like caressing or holding hands or giving a massage or even just putting your hand on someone's back. There are people who feel very connected to others through that physical touch. So if you're wondering what your love languages are, you can take the quiz. It's free at 5lovelanguages.com. I'm going to link to that as well below. And I think it's really helpful to get a sense. Many of us know right away what our love languages are just by historical, what has made us feel good. But it does help to take that test and get awareness. And the book is actually super helpful too, because it talks about ways to work with your love languages and the love languages of your partner. But on a broader sense, I really think the love languages can be helpful for not just our romantic partners, but for our work connections and our friendships. I've noticed that in past work relationships where I had people who were working for me, I could get a sense of what their love language was, especially if it was words of affirmation, which tends to be pretty easy to do in the workplace. Physical touch is really not something you can do so much in the workplace, but words of affirmation or even quality time where you're having a one-on-one interaction with your colleagues, it's really helpful to creating a cohesive environment, to creating connection even within the workplace. So I think this is valuable across the board. So that's the pro of this. Let's get into the dark side. It's pretty simple. The dark side of the love languages is that people who are narcissistic or anyone who is trying to manipulate others will use your love language to love bomb you. Now, love bombing is a concept where a person just gives us everything we want in mass quantity, repetitively. And so we get so overwhelmed by this feeling of love that is incredibly intoxicating. It's like we have met the best person we've ever met. We've finally met our soulmate or our best friend or our whatever, however you're going to term it. But this person comes at us with all the things that make us feel special. And they will many times figure this out through quick interactions with us. A lot of times the chosen love bombing that a lot of narcissists will use is words of affirmation. So this is something that I've understood about myself, is why I often get into narcissistic relationships and seem to attract them, is because my love language is the language that narcissists often speak in the beginning when they're trying to manipulate someone. Now that I understand that, I am very guarded when someone comes at me with a whole bunch of love language, a whole bunch of confirmation or validation or compliments in a way that is not normal or not healthy, meaning there's sort of a progression. I can think of one example right off the bat. I had an incredibly narcissistic boss who, in my interview with this person, just totally complimented everything with my skills and my compassion and my presence and all my experience, and it was just over the top. And at the time I was feeling really low, and oh my gosh, I needed that validation, I needed that confirmation, and it was almost like this person could see that in me. And so the interview was all of that. And then literally on the first day I started, the person couldn't even remember who I was, had like no time for me. It was like all an act. They were putting on this major charm just to get me in the door, get me to sign on, and then they changed on a dime. Now, it doesn't often happen that quickly, but with narcissistic people and manipulators, they do eventually drop the mask. That's the expression that is used. They stop love bombing you. They stop doing all the loving things that you have come to expect from them. And it can be incredibly abrupt and very abusive, actually. So it's important to be able to recognize love bombing early on. And like I said, knowing your own love language, knowing where they might get in, because that's exactly what it is. Your love language, in some cases, when we're talking about narcissists or manipulators, that's your weak spot. It's the spot that they're going to hit you at, and that's going to make you potentially vulnerable to be connected with these types. So, like I said, overall, understanding your love languages is super powerful. It's super positive, but understanding this dark side is even more protective and helpful. So, as usual, I hope this helped. If it did, please like, give the thumbs up, share with friends, and comment if this resonates with you. I'm really interested to know if other people have had experiences like I have in terms of the love languages being used against us. So, as always, I wish you happiness and good health, and I thank you for being with me.